Welcome into One-on-One Nightly. I'm Ryan Gregware. I'm joined with Bridge Gotham. Bridge, we're both done with finals. I know that. The weather's getting really nice. I think the days of the sweatshirt, sweatpants are finally upon us. Before we get into what we're going to talk about, because we really do have a lot, just want to get to know, how are you doing on this Wednesday?
I'm doing all right, Ryan. You talk about great weather. I think the weather's almost too good. I was sweating today. We talked about having our fans on full blast. It's really that kind of day. But the science summer's here. Lots to look forward to. Lots to look forward to in the sports world. We got finals out of the way. We're about a month and a half into baseball. We got the NBA playoffs coming on. Lots to talk about here.
Yeah, you talked about how in the sports world with the NBA playoffs, and for us both Knicks fans, I think this is the most by far in my lifetime I've ever looked into a playoff series. We'll start with that. We'll go into the Nets, then we'll go some general NBA stuff. We'll touch on some MLB. We'll come back to the NBA. Ton to talk about, but let's just get right into it because I don't want to waste your time, and I know that we have a lot to say. So let's say it. So we're going to start with the Knicks, and obviously they finished off a great season with a win versus Celtics team who was depleted, didn't start any of their guys. They had to fight, they had to battle, but by doing so, they get the 4 spot in the East, and they get a matchup which I think is favorable in the Atlanta Hawks, right? It was basically the Hawks, Bucks, or Heat, and I'd say the Hawks are certainly, the most desirable of the three. So just want to start with you. This Hawks-Knicks matchup coming this weekend. What are your kind of opening thoughts, impressions just overall on that? And then kind of we'll go into some big-time stuff with what you think they can do past that. But Knicks, Hawks, what are you kind of thinking there?
Yeah, a lot to break down here. And like you said, it was really the playoff seeding that was the biggest thing people were talking about the last couple of weeks. We knew the Knicks weren't going to catch the Bucks at 3. It was going to be 4, 5, or 6. So they were neck and neck with the Hawks and Heat. And luckily the things, it worked out that they got the 4 and they avoided the Heat in the first round and they got home court advantage. So it was really the best case scenario based on their performance throughout the season. Now, Atlanta, we've talked about this. They swept them in the season series. Now, of course, that doesn't mean much when it comes to the postseason. You look at all sports, you think about in football, the Saints beat the Bucks twice, then lost in the playoffs. So, of course, playoffs a huge, whole different animal, right? But I think the Knicks match up well. We were also talking about what the Knicks need to do in order to really prevent Trae Young from doing his thing. We talked about maybe the Knicks starting Frank Ntilikina at shooting guard over Elfrid Payton, shooting guard, point guard, whatever the case may be. Not only does he bring the added defense, but you look at Payton's struggles over the last 5 or so games. He's been abysmal. He's been a turnover machine. I think adding Frank into the starting lineup would really boost the Knicks' chances, and they have home court. I don't want to go off on a limb here, but I do think the Knicks can win this series. But if they're going to win this series, it's going to be about their defense. It's all about Tom Thibodeau, his mentality. I don't know. I see this going 6 games with the Knicks winning. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you think the Knicks have to do in order to really, take this one home?
Yeah, there's a ton to unpack here. First off, getting the home court, I think, is massive. Obviously, we don't really remember well what it's like to host a playoff series. But as my family's told me, some older people, it's that MSG in the playoff is like nothing else. It got announced today there'll be 13,000 fans, which is over, I think, 65% capacity. So that's huge to get the 4 home games and not the 3 to get the playoffs back in the Mecca. But I think this series is going to be a dogfight. I really do. You talked about the 3-0 versus the regular season. I think that's completely irrelevant. 1, as you said, it's the regular season. 2, they're really different teams since Nate McMillan took over. Obviously, they fired Lloyd Pierce middle of the year, and they're 26-11 with their new head coach. That is the best in the East since that stretch. Trae Young also missed one of those games, and in the one game with McMillan and Trae Young, he left the middle of the third quarter. So I think you have to throw all that out the window. And the reason I think that this series is such a dogfight is I think when you look at, you see Julius Randle, right? He's dropped 40 plus against the Hawks multiple times. They'll be fine there. But it's really the point guard matchup. And it's been the thing that's killed the Knicks all year with Elfrid Payton. Tom Thibodeau has a loyalty to his guys. You have to respect it. But at a certain point, it's gone too far. And it definitely is with Payton. Bridge, over his last 5 games, he has more turnovers than field goals, free throws, and threes combined. So he's lost all his confidence. He's done. He's not aggressive anymore. The thing early in the season was Elfrid Payton thinks he's Russell Westbrook in Elfrid Payton's body, which was the worst case scenario. But now he's even worse than that. And on the defensive end, too, I think what Thibodeau loves is his size. But throughout the season, I know it's a small sample size. I know it's weird to look at stuff like this. Trae Young had 22 points in a 14-minute stretch guarded by Payton. So clearly there are some problems there. You talked about starting Frank, and I love Frank. I've been advocating him all year to get more minutes. I think he's perfect. He's got the size. He is Peyton without the aggression. I think they have to be aggressive here because I don't like starting off with Peyton. There have been reports that Tibbs is considering it, and I think it's something you have to do. I know it'd be weird to switch up the lineup for really the first time all season going to the playoffs, but I think you need to be brash. You need to be bold, especially against a Hawks team that is red hot. So I do think that's what they need to do if they want to kind of, weather the storm, lock down Trae Young, and then let Julius Randle and RJ kind of cook.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we agree on this, just because the Knicks have been great this season. And offensively, you talk about Julius Randle. I mean, about 24 points a game. RJ Barrett really coming into his own, averaging in the high teens. These guys are great, but it all comes down to their defense. And Elfrid Payton is killing them on defense. It just doesn't work. And look, consistency is all about basketball. You talked about Tibbs and how he's loyal, but it is time for a change. If you're going to win games, if you're going to win playoff basketball, you have to see what you did wrong. You have to make some changes, make adjustments. That's what coaching's all about. And I trust Thibodeau. I mean, he's a great coach, has experience. He has all of that. I think that he will make the right decision, but you never know. But I think adding Frank into the starting lineup does a lot. Help with the distribution of Julius, RJ, Reggie Bullock, and just all their pieces that they've brought in. Bringing back Taj Gibson earlier in the season. I think the biggest acquisition was Derrick Rose midseason, just what he's done for the culture. Of course, him and Tibbs have that relationship from their time in Chicago, and I believe briefly up in Minnesota as well. But, those two work so well together. And of course, add Taj Gibson again, sort of that little triangle trio there. And Rose, I'm telling you, I mean, you've seen it, I've seen it. He's scoring upwards of 20 points multiple times coming off the bench. And you love that he accepts his role. He's not trying to be Superman. He's okay with not starting. He understands that I can come off the bench. I can play, 25, 30 minutes and provide the boost that this team needs. And maybe I'll finish. I'll be on that final five. So again, everything coming together. I like where the Knicks are at. Make some small changes and move on. I think they can beat the Hawks, but you never know.
Yeah, you don't. And the other thing I wanted to talk about the Knicks in more broad question, because I think it's really interesting because going into the year, obviously, they've shattered the expectations, right? Expected to win 22. You win almost 20 more games than that. All that is great. And there's been a lot of talk about what we can take from this season because I do think their ceiling is probably, like, I hate to say this, it's beating the Hawks. I don't think they stand a chance against Philly. They looked overmatched all year. They just don't have the talent. It is what it is. They're young. They came out of nowhere. And I think their floor is obviously losing to the Hawks in the first round. So it's not much wiggle room in between there. And then the question goes to, was this season a success? And I think you can look at it in a few ways because obviously beginning of the year to now, it is a massive success. I'd argue, like I would really argue this, the team that wins the title might be the only team that had more of a success this season than the Knicks because, assuming all these championship or bust teams are in at the end, the Knicks are not championship or bust, not even close. And to come where they were, the rebuilding team, to not really add a massive impact player is, I think, a great success. Thibodeau, obviously, coach of the year candidate. We'll get more into that later. But if they do lose to the Hawks, I can't help but feel really disappointed, Ridge. Like, I think going into it, they're basically a coin flip with the Vegas odds. They opened as underdogs. I think they've now shifted to favorites. Whatever. It's really close in that aspect. But I do think, even though, like, this season has been maybe the greatest experience for me as a Knicks fan, you have to be at least disappointed if they lose to the Hawks. Do you feel the same way? Would you see it as kind of a failure, or are you looking at it more from the beginning of the year where everything is kind of, you're playing with house money?
Yeah, no, Ryan, you hit the nail on the head because there's really two sides to this argument. There's the preseason idea of making the playoffs at all being a success. I mean, you look at ESPN, they gave the Knicks a 2% chance to even make the playoffs in the preseason. Bleacher Report projected them to win 13 games. And the person writing that article said that they may have been kind in projecting them to win 13 games. So it was an embarrassing time to be a Knicks fan. But look at them. They won 41 games. They're fourth in the East. So I think the way I see it is that the bar has been raised. It was raised from a playoff berth being a success to now look at how well we've done. Let's win a playoff series. And this is a winnable playoff series. So let's say that they lose to the Hawks in 5, 6, even 7 games. You're going to go on First Take, whatever sports show there may be. The Knicks season will be deemed a failure because of how well they played up to this point, and now it all comes crashing down. No matter the manner that they lose in, a loss is a loss, and it'll be tough to swallow. But I also agree with you in the fact that I think the second round is their ceiling. And I think that, let's say they get to the second round, they face probably Philadelphia in the second round. No matter how many games they lose to them in that series, I still think the season is a success if you can get past the first round, and the possibility of potentially luring a big free agent, whether it's via trade or possibly signing in the offseason. I think that this season will be a great springboard to potentially get that superstar to New York and possibly, maybe, get them to the top of the Eastern Conference next year.
Yeah, it's tough to say. I certainly think the springboard argument is relevant, but at the same time, you can't guarantee anything in this league. Like, they were the 4 seed this year. A few bounces go the wrong way. They're in the play-in, and then they lose the play-in. There's all these different questions. So I don't think you can just lock in, like, 4 seed, here's how they're going to improve, which is why I do think you do have to grab the series. So I don't think the overall season would be a failure, but I think the end of the season would leave a very sour taste in all of Knicks fans' mouths. It's not like they're playing the Bucks. It's not like they're even playing the Heat. They're playing an Atlanta Hawks team who's just as inexperienced as them. I'd honestly argue the Knicks have more experience with Tibbs at the helm because none of the Hawks have been there. None of the Knicks have been there, except Tibbs and kind of D Rose, I guess. He's been in the playoffs before. That experience is kind of the tiebreaker. So with that perspective, it's not the Heat, it's not the Bucks. I do think you need to go and take this series. I really do. The talent that the Knicks have is nothing special, which is why the floor or the ceiling, whatever you want to say, is the second round. They will not get past Philly. You said probably Philly. It's Philly. Let's not think crazy here. The Philadelphia 76ers will be there waiting for them if they're lucky enough to get there. And so I do think you do have to grab the series. And I really think that you can look at the season, even if you lose in 5 or get swept by Philly, as a success overall, because that really is the house money of house money. But when you're going into this series as, a pick'em, a small favorite, a slim underdog, you should have these expectations. You have home court for a reason, right? Like, you were better than them this season to get the home court. I know the records were the same, but you did go 3-0. You get the home court. It's the Mecca. All we've heard about, at least all I've heard about my whole life, is how special MSG is in the playoffs, how much the fans care, how much they elevate the team. And I do think it's time to see it. The bar has certainly been raised, and I'm glad it has, because the expectations, they really did shift from, this team, they're playing bad teams early, they'll fizzle off, and then it's like, they're just a low playoff team, I'm not expecting much. And now it's, you're not beating the Bucks, you're not beating the Lakers, you're not even getting to the conference finals. So I do love in that aspect how the goalposts have shifted, but you got to meet those expectations. And so to do that, I do think you need to take care of a Hawks team who isn't anything better than you on paper or really on the court.
Yeah, no, you nailed it all there. And I think before we shift to the Brooklyn Nets, which is our next topic, I do want to talk about, I want to pitch to you something that is very unlikely. But if the Knicks manage to get past the 76ers, I think the possibility of a Subway Series in the conference finals sounds like every New York basketball fan's dream. So it's nice to know that, albeit very slim, there's a chance that we could get New York Knicks versus the Brooklyn Nets in the conference finals. Would be pretty awesome. But the Nets, they also have a lot of work to do on their side. So, lead us here, Ryan. Tell us about the Nets and what they have to do in their first round series against Boston.
All right. Well, first off, before I get into that, you said you're pitching this to me. I will strike out every time if that's hypothetical. That will not happen. I'm sorry. The Knicks are not getting past the Sixers. I love the Knicks, but I don't want you to get hurt, Rich. And so to do that, you need to mentally prepare for what this team's ceiling is. Everything's house at that point. But yeah, let's go to the Nets. Obviously, the Knicks early in the year, they were kind of dubbed, as Julius Randle said, the Big 15. And we saw the other day in Kevin Durant's press conference, now the Nets are going by the Big 15.
I think we're the Big 15. So, yeah, we'll be all right.
Yeah, so, the Nets are saying they're the Big 15. It's all fun and games. I know early in the season also, Harden's been putting some sub-tweets out on the Knicks, friendly banter back and forth there. But yeah, shifting to the Nets, the Big Three have only played 8 games together all year. They will face the Boston Celtics. The Celtics just beat the Wizards by 18 points in the playing game. Jason Tatum dropped 50 points yesterday. It was a competitive first half, but the Celtics certainly pulled away. And I do think if you look at this matchup, it was more favorable. Not that the Wizards would give the Nets trouble, but the Wizards were one of the hottest teams in basketball going into this. They've won 17 of 23 going into the playing game. And with Westbrook and all the animosity towards Durant, that would have been a series where I think people could have spun it as the Wizards pushing it with how hot they've been playing. But the Celtics took care of business. You have to give credit to Tatum. Obviously, Jaylen Brown is out, so that, they don't have the two All-Stars. So the Nets here, they really should take care of things, Bridge. The only concern is the 8 games played together between the big three. Do you think this is a concern, or do you think by the playoffs it'll all be sorted out? Their superstars will learn how to play together.
It's a little bit of both. Let's talk about, I guess, super teams coming together. I mean, the Miami Heat in 2011, they started 9-8. They still made it to the finals. They fell to the Mavericks, of course. So it takes time for these superstars to gel. Of course, D Wade giving the reins to LeBron, they eventually won it the following year. But looking at the Nets here, well, they've only played 8 games together, sure, but they've done well in those 8 games, and they've all played a good amount of games either individually or with one other superstar without the big three, if that makes sense. So it's not like one of them has missed the whole season or if that's the case. So they've played a lot of time. So it's more about coming together. And I think that, yes, the Nets can come together. And I also think that getting the Celtics in the first round is great. And a shorthanded Celtics makes it even better because it allows the Nets to ease into these playoffs, not really give Durant and Harden. Of course, they're going to be playing upwards of 35 minutes a game, but they'll be able to ease off knowing that, the Celtics, they're without Jaylen Brown. They aren't at full strength. So they'll be able to, as I said before, they'll ease in. And by the time they get to the second round, they'll be feeling confident. They'll be ready to take on the winner of the Bucks versus the Heat, which I believe can go either way. We'll talk about that later. But I do think that the Brooklyn Nets have more than enough time to put it together. I think that they are already 75% of the way there. And I think by the time that they get to, I believe that when they get to the finals, I think they'll be at full strength.
Yeah, I've been on the show a few times. And when I talk the Nets, I always say, I don't care how many games they've played. They are superstars. They are the best of the best in this league. They will figure out how to play together. The one ball argument, I always laugh at that. I think it's ridiculous. These guys can coexist. They will figure it out. I think it's funny. I saw Brad Stevens. He had a really kind of funny quote the other day about facing the Nets. And he goes, it's hard to see them losing the first round. He goes on to praise them, calls them the best of the best. So he's really, the way he's talking, it's like there are no expectations for the Celtics. Not that there should be. Going into this year, there certainly were. I think the Celtics have a ton of questions coming up. That's a topic for another day. But yeah, so this series, I don't see any issue with the Nets. The firepower that they have will be so much for the Celtics. They just won't be able to overcome it. Tatum dropped 50 the other day. He'll need to do that every single game of the series to even make it close competitive because the firepower that the Nets have will blow him out of the water. With Kemba Walker being a shell of himself, he's not what he was. He can't shoot the mid-range like he could. The defense is not there for him. And not having a guy like Jaylen Brown, who's a true two-way player in this game, it hurts. And there's a reason they're the 7. There's a reason they were 500 this year. They're just not that good of a basketball team. It's that simple. So when I look at this series, I'd be shocked if it's anything less than Nets in 4. I really do. I don't see them losing to one game. They have their, obviously, sights focused on much bigger prizes here. But this is a series. I do think it's favorable. I kind of wish it was the Wizards, I'm not going to lie, for that Westbrook versus Durant rematch. I think that would have been really fun to watch. Westbrook would have gave 150%, whatever he could. He was going to put it all on the court to try to beat Durant. But hey, they didn't handle their business versus the Celtics. So this is a Celtics reward. You get to face the best team in basketball for winning the play-in game.
Yep. No, I'm right. I'm with you on that. I was hoping for Wizards because of the Westbrook Durant storyline. Would have been a lot of fun because they haven't faced each other in the playoffs because, of course, Westbrook can't get out of the first round past 5 years. But again, for this series, I think it's a sweep. Maybe Nets in 5 if Tatum has one of his 50, 60-point games and they win it at home at the TD Garden. Maybe they'll get one game, but I'd be surprised if they even get that far.
Yeah, so let's take a quick break, Bridge. We have a ton more basketball to talk, a lot more during the show. We're going to come back with some play-in. Obviously, the East play-ins, first games were yesterday. We have the West taking place today. Lakers, Warriors right after the show. We'll lead you right into that. So stay tuned. This is the place to be. One-on-one nightly. We'll be right back. we are back with more One-on-One Nightly. We're going to stick with the NBA. We had a great conversation earlier. Let's continue it with some play-in stuff. It's the first ever, the NBA play-in games. I think it's a really interesting conversation, the role of them and if they're going to stay. We know that there have been guys who've bashed it. LeBron last year, was for it. Now, obviously, with his team in it, he's against it. The Mavericks were very vocal against it, which I think it's funny because once they kind of solidified themselves as, avoiding it, I didn't really hear the same complaints I did earlier. But nevertheless, we had the first two games yesterday. Both were not very exciting all the way through. The Hornets game was a blowout. They were not ready for the Pacers, and the Celtics handled the Wizards, how we just talked about. But Bridge, going more broad, I want to know what you think overall on this idea of the play-in. Do you think it stays? Do you think it's the right move for the NBA to have these 7-8 matchups, 9-10 matchups? Like, what do you think of the whole formatting here?
Yeah, great points, Ryan. I have a lot to say here. I actually love the play-in, the whole idea of it, because, I see it as a neat way to sort of incentivize the last 2 weeks of the season. Just think about it. Like, the last 2 weeks of the season, it's always just a countdown until the playoffs. What can you really remember from like those past 2 weeks? Usually it's arguments for who's all NBA, and we'll get to that later in the show. But now there's this play-in tournament, and that's really fueled a lot of teams. Let's look at Washington. You said it last segment. They're 17-6 over the last 23 games. They were 15-28 at the All-Star break, and now they're 34-38. And I think the play-in was a huge motivation for Westbrook, Beal, and that whole squad to really fight because they knew that they only had to get to 10. Of course, they ended up getting to 8, but the fact that there was this chance for them to get into the playoffs without having to go all the way into the top 8, that made the last couple of weeks, the last month, just a fight for the Washington Wizards. And I always thought, when you talk about a play-in tournament, I always assumed it would be, okay, 7 plays 10 and 8 plays 9, just a regular tournament style, right? But I kind of like this because it almost rewards the better team. It gives the 7 the chance to, okay, just, win one game, secure your spot, you get extra rest. I feel like that's pretty fair. Because if you do it the other way, then it's almost like March Madness style where the 7, like each team sort of gets hurt equally, whereas this gives the higher seeds more of an advantage, which they deserve based on their performance and their standing throughout the season. And another point I want to make is, okay, last night's action, it wasn't the most exciting, right? But again, look, these are mediocre teams. And we got very lucky this year because in, just over an hour, the Warriors and Lakers will be tipping off. That's LeBron versus Steph. That's playoff DNA. That is must-watch basketball. And Adam Silver is very happy about that. This, I believe it'll probably be the most-watched game this season so far. It might even be more than the finals in a couple of months. You got Steph and LeBron one game. Of course, the loser will still have a chance to play for that 8 seed, but it doesn't get much better than this. This is like a March Madness winner-take-all kind of game. And I feel terrible for the Phoenix Suns because they get the winner of this game in the first round. That is a brutal way to start your playoffs after finishing second in the West. You work so hard and you can get LeBron in the first round. That's awful. Feel bad for Suns fans out there. That is a tough draw.
Yeah. The thing on the play-in is I love the idea of it. And the number one thing you talk about is it gives team hope. I have a friend who's a Wizards fan, shout out Jack, and he was texting me the other day how, normal season he would have given up. They were the 15 seed, but the idea, the lure of getting a 10 seed and still fighting for something kept him and the team invested. It kept them. They ended up stacking wins. They went on a big win streak. I think they won 8 in a row at some point in the year to get into that plan. And they did lose it and everything like that. But I think that ability is huge. It's just on the execution because I think there's another question. Do teams really want to be in the plan? We saw the Hornets yesterday. They had no business of playing basketball. We saw the Spurs too. I know that game's going on. I believe they're down, 5-6, whatever at halftime. They bought out a starter. They bought out LaMarcus Aldridge, towards the middle of the season here. Any team that's really competing for a title and trying to make the playoffs, you don't buy a guy like that out who is starting on your team, playing 30 minutes a game. So I do think that's a question. Do teams really want there? Do the Spurs deserve it? Did the Hornets deserve it? Do the Pacers deserve a chance to play the Wizards for the playoffs? I think that's another really interesting question. But you talked about the game that we'll have in an hour, and we'll give predictions. We'll preview that game in a minute. And that's why I think this conversation is kind of irrelevant, because once we got a matchup like Steph versus LeBron, like the Lakers and Warriors, any chance of this going away went out the window. Because as you said, Adam Silver is the happiest. He's the kid in the candy store right now getting this game. It'll get huge numbers, as you talked about. Celtics-Wizards game also got huge numbers. I'm sure he loves that. Over 2.5 million people, I believe, watched that game. So I do think from that aspect, obviously that'll be an awesome game. But 2 games yesterday were a wash. They were not, interesting games. They didn't feel like we were watching playoff teams. I was watching, the first quarter of Hornets Pacers did not feel like 2 playoff teams. It didn't really even feel like one, give credit to the Pacers putting up 144, but it didn't have the same aura. And it's weird because these stats don't count for the playoffs. I don't think they count for the regular season. So what are they? They're really not playoff games. They kind of are. That it's kind of weird in that aspect. And the other thing you talked about is the format with the 7, 8, 9, 10. And I think it's interesting because we talked about before, obviously, you'd assume 7, 10, you'd assume 8 versus 9, right? That would be the logical play. I don't have a huge problem with this, and I get why they did it because it allows for bigger matchups as we have the Warriors and Lakers. Those 2 teams would have played the Spurs and the Grizzlies, probably destroyed both them, and then they would have never faced in this year's playoffs. 7 and 8, I don't assume that they would have, reached the conference finals or anything like that. But with this, we get those really good matchups with the Warriors and Lakers, and the loser is not automatically eliminated because I don't think that would be fair if it was, as you said, a March Madness style where winner goes home, one guy has a bad shooting night and you're done. Those guys, they got the 7 and 8 seeds. They deserve the 1-game cushion, and they will get it because obviously the loser of that game will get a chance to grab the 8 with the Grizzlies and Spurs winner. So I think from that aspect, it's fair. I'll go out and say right now, if the Knicks were in it, I'd be killing it. If they were a 7-8, I'd be bashing the hell out of it. If they're an 8-9 or a 9-10, I'd be loving it. So I do think it's, it really depends on your team, where you're at. But I do think it's a really interesting concept. And as you said, we're talking about it. And I think that's the biggest thing because normally, as you said, the last, month of the year is pretty boring, right? We're going at the narratives. We're looking at the awards, which we will get to, as you mentioned. But the play-ins that offer a different dimension. We had Curry dropping 46 the other day to get that 8. In a normal year, it would have been, who knows what's going on there. But yeah, I agree with what you said. I do definitely think there are cons, and they need to work on that because I don't want to see teams in the play-in that don't want to be in the play-in. I want these teams to want to fight for the playoffs and give 100% effort on the court. So however they can do that, I think that this play-in could be a thing that's really there for a long time.
Yeah, no, I think there's, like you said, there's 2 sides to the equation here. And we've only had a night of play-in basketball under our belt, maybe a night and a half or a night and a quarter, whatever the case may be now. But I think we'll have a much better idea about a week from now when we're play-ins all in the book. Okay, how did this work? Do we really want this? So it's still pretty early. And I also agree. We sort of have the LeBron mentality of we love the play-in until we're in it. I feel like we'd both be flooding Adam Silver's inbox right now with some, carefully worded messages about the play-in game and why it's not a good idea. But let's sort of shift gears here towards the Lakers and Warriors tipping off in about an hour from now. What are your thoughts on this game? Just everything about it. Break it down.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it 100%. I'm thrilled that we get to watch the full thing. We go off, as I said earlier. You guys are watching nightly, get right into that game. You'll get seated. That's your night. We have it planned out for you there.
Perfect time.
I think it's going to be an awesome game, as in, we're going to see the stars. I don't think the actual on the court will be as good. I'll get into that in a second, but I do think that it's interesting. These teams are both kind of like in weird directions. The Lakers have won 5 in a row going into this, but that's a weird 5 games. LeBron's missed 22 of the last 26. He hasn't really been there. It feels like they've been nursing him back and kind of waiting to unload him in the playoffs. And that's why I don't think this game will be close. I think with the Lakers, they've been hobbled a ton, but I do think when it comes down to it, they're going to come out on fire tonight. They're going to come out with a passion. So I do have the Lakers pretty convincingly here, but the Warriors are no slouch. And we'll talk about the other top seeds in the West in a minute. And I would really hope that the Warriors lose to a Spurs or a Grizzlies next game, because they are also kind of peaking right now. Over the last 20 games, they have the best net rating, and I think the second best defensive net rating. Draymond is all the way back right now, so you have that Weapon X seeing it for you. And obviously we know Steph Curry, he can carry a team. He can drop 50. He can do what you need to win the game. He's been there. He has all the experience in the world, which is why I think tonight's game is so interesting, because you have, out of all these West playoff teams, by far the 2 most experienced in a LeBron-led team and the Golden State Warriors, who were in the finals, 5 straight years, 6 straight years, whatever it was. So I think from that aspect, it's good, but I do like the Lakers in this one, but you can't sleep on the Warriors past this. So I like the Lakers in a blowout 15, 20-point game, just because I think that they've been waiting for this. they've heard the criticisms. People have said, they're going to lose this. They don't deserve to be here. They've been hobbling. I think they're kind of ready to unload tonight. And I just don't think the Warriors have enough defense to contain a D down low. I don't think besides Steph, I love Wiggins, but I don't think he can match what the Lakers can do for you. So I like the Lakers in this one, but I think overall getting this matchup is a treat for the NBA.
Yeah, no, I think the real winner tonight is the NBA, like you said. Lakers and Warriors, I feel like we spoke about this earlier, but whoever loses this game, I think will still end up getting the 8 seed after they beat, I believe, Memphis or San Antonio. So the NBA wins. This is an awesome matchup. You said you think it's Lakers by 15 or 20. I think it's Lakers. I think it's probably by closer to 10. I think the Warriors can keep it close. I think it'll be a close game in the first half. I think third quarter will really determine the outcome of the game. And then fourth quarter will be all about, maintaining that position. But let's say, okay, Lakers get the 7 seed, the Warriors get the 8 seed. Let's look at those first round playoff matchups between Lakers and Suns, Warriors and Jazz. I mean, it's a tough draw for the first round of the playoffs. I think the Lakers could potentially, I don't even think it would be called an upset if they beat the Suns. I think that Vegas will have Lakers favored in that series. And I also think that although the Jazz are probably the better team over the Warriors, I still think, with Donovan Mitchell having not really played in the past month and Steph Curry playing out of his mind, I think that series could also be really interesting. Could go 5-6 games. So I don't know. What do you think about those first round series? Should the Suns and Jazz be scared of the Lakers and Warriors?
Yeah, it's a good question. Before we get into that, there was one more thing on the Lakers-Warriors game I wanted to touch on that I think is so funny, and it happens all the time with LeBron. I think it was yesterday, day before, he called Curry the MVP of the league. And so immediately you have people who were like, he's just saying this so, it looks better for when he wins and his path is easier. I think it's so funny how we always super dissect everything LeBron says and tear it to a million pieces when he could have just, flat out thought, man, like Curry's averaging 32, oldest guy since Jordan to lead the league in scoring. He's the MVP. But so I think that's kind of another funny aspect of this game. And it's also him kind of hyping it up a little because it's the MVP versus the King, all that kind of aspect. And you talked about if the Lakers win, I do think they're obviously going to win. But, protecting myself and protecting the segment here, I think whoever the Lakers get, whether it's the Suns or Jazz, they're going to handle. I really do. I think that the Lakers are not a typical 7 seed. They were not emphasizing their seed, right? With the fans last year, they didn't have any. This year, it'll be limited capacity. But Lakers fans travel well regardless. I don't think the seeding is a concern for them. It is for some other teams like the Clippers who actually kind of lost some games intentionally to avoid the Lakers, which I think should tell you how the league sees the Lakers, right? This is not a 7 seed, 8 seed, whatever it is. They'll absolutely be in one of these series. They're not going to fall out. They're not going to lose 2 of these games. And so I think, honestly, like if it is the Suns, I love what the Suns have done. And I do think the Suns are honestly a better team than the Jazz, which I think is another interesting debate. You have CP3, that vet presence. He isn't really a superstar, though. He's not this next echelon of like guys who can win you a title. He's never been to the finals. I don't think he's been to the conference finals either. And it's LeBron and it's the Lakers. So I don't like that matchup for the Suns. They are, besides CP3, they are not experiencing the playoffs at all. They had their own kind of drought going. Devin Booker's never been there. His really big moment was the bubble last year. So I do think that would be an upset watch wherever the Lakers play. So I think you have to look into that. And the Warriors, Jazz, whatever it is, I think that's really interesting. The Jazz have obviously been the team all year. They've been in command of that one for a while now. The big issue with them is Donovan Mitchell. He hasn't played in over a month plus. It's an ankle injury. Those tend to linger. Obviously, he's the best doctors in the world. Every ankle injury I've had has lingered. I'm sure they're being super cautious. It looks like they probably could have brought him back early, but there was no reason to. I'm just concerned with the rust. And not necessarily them playing together, but the rust of him. Is he going to come back his normal self? Last year he put on a show in the playoffs. Him versus Jamal Murray in the first round was the round of the series. So I do think you have to see how that ankle heals, and I think that will be the difference. Because going past, obviously, Curry, this Jazz roster is way better constructed than that Warriors. I'd expect them to win that series in 6, 5, 6, maybe 7. It goes there. But I wouldn't be too concerned about the Jazz. It's weird, too, because I just said that I like the Suns better, but I do think it's just the matchup, right? I just don't think the Lakers will lose to either of these teams. And I think that's how you have to look at it right now because of what they've done in the playoffs before.
Yeah, no, and one last thing I want to say before we cut to break is you spoke about the ankle injury. Can Donovan Mitchell come back? Let's not forget LeBron is also coming back from an ankle injury. And of course, he's really taking his time because he has the luxury of doing so. But of course, playoff LeBron, playoff mode, whatever you want to call it. Will we really see that tonight? I hope so. I think so. But you never know coming off an injury like that.
Yeah, the other thing with the West, too, that I think is so awesome is I could legitimately see like 6 of these teams in the conference finals. Probably not the Warriors and probably not the Mavericks, but every other team I could really see making a run here. And I think that's so cool because we haven't had that in recent years. Obviously, it's now a superstar league. Super teams, I'm not a fan of them. They obviously have their pros and cons, but this is a year where there's so much balance. Like the seeding really doesn't mean anything this year. You have, I think, like the 3 through 6 all have the same record or they're all within a game. It's something crazy like that. So I do think that is a really cool aspect with the West. Like the Blazers, I believe, play the Nuggets in the first round. I could see either of those teams winning that series and then upsetting the Jazz or Suns, whoever gets past there. It's so interesting. Are there one of these middle teams, Bridge, that you look at as kind of a sleeping giant? The seeding didn't fall the right way for them, but they're just as good as everyone else.
Well, I'd actually say you said seeding didn't fall the right way. I'd say let's look at a team where the seeding fell the right way. Number 4, the Clippers. I mean, they purposefully lost the last couple of games so they could avoid the Lakers in the first round. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, are they getting the Nuggets in the first round or the Mavs? The Mavs, okay. So they get the Mavs in the first round. I think their path to the conference finals is a very good path. I think after all the memes of last year, pandemic P, Paul George not coming up big in the playoffs, I think this is a great chance for him and the Clippers as a whole to redeem themselves. New coach with Tyronn Lue, some new pieces to work with. I think the Clippers are the sleeper to go to the conference finals, maybe even to the finals, although I personally don't think they will, but, keep an eye out on them.
Yeah, it's a rematch of a series last year we saw when Porzingis got hurt. The whole series was changed. I do agree. I think it's very favorable for them. I do think it's weird, though, like if they actually did avoid the Lakers, I know there's a lot of talk. I know I brought that up earlier. They did avoid the Lakers. That concerns me because to win a championship, to be the best, you have to beat the best. Mm-hmm. So I certainly don't love that, but they definitely get a favorable matchup. I think that's a good matchup for them. The Nuggets, too, I think are really interesting because I legitimately did see them as a finals team. I really did. I thought they could be there. Jamal Murray gets hurt, who was the star of last year's playoffs for them. He took over 2 or 3 games a series, just hitting every shot, big shot after big shot. And when he went down, I kind of wrote them off, stopped paying attention for a little bit. But they went 16-8 without him. Nikola Jokic, we'll talk about him towards the end of the show, his MVP hopes, everything like that. He got the step steady. They were in it. They were still winning games. So I do think that series versus the Blazers is going to be awesome. I do like the Nuggets just because I think Jokic is an X factor that we're not seeing right now. Historic numbers, but I do think that that's a really good one to watch. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back with some MLB, and then we'll get in some more NBA. MLB, we're going to talk about Mets, Yankees, then kind of the state of the game. There's been some interesting stuff that's happened in the last few days. So we'll get into that. We'll be right back with more One-on-One Nightly. Welcome back to One-on-One Nightly. We're going to shift here to some MLB. We'll start with the Mets, who are dealing with a ton of injuries right now. A few hours before the show, they added another guy to the IL, Taijuan Walker, who's having an amazing year, one of the best signings in the offseason. He had a 2.05 ERA, which brings the total up to 14. So they now have 14 guys on the IL, 8 since the start of May, where, frankly enough, I have to give them credit. They're 11-5 with all these injuries. They continue to win games. Nice win over the Braves yesterday. But today's lineup was one of the funniest things, I'd seen all year. It really is a next man up mentality right now. They traded $1 for Cameron Maybin a few days ago, and he is now their 3-hitter. So I guess the cost of the 3-hitter nowadays is literally like a piece of gum. I think it's so funny how things are unraveling here. But just to start with you, kind of what are your thoughts on all these injuries? Can they weather them? Are they in for some trouble here? They are leading the NL East right now, but do you see that kind of, standing pat?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if I got a call from the Mets GM asking me to come play and start tomorrow. I mean, I really wouldn't. I mean, you look at all their injuries, it is, like you said, next man up mentality. Like they're taking guys, they're going to Walmart cash register. They're taking whoever they can get. I mean, seriously, this is, if you're a Mets fan right now and you look at, I'd say at least, the majority of your good players are sitting out now. I mean, you look at Pilar got hit in the face, I think Monday night, was it? I mean, brutal fastball, his nose, he was bleeding. I mean, that's a tough way. I mean, that's a very visible way to really see injury. But I mean, like you said, Walker from the mound was a real great pitcher for him. And I think who else is it? Conforto, McNeil, DeGrom, Davis, Nimmo, Lugo, Carrasco. There's I could go on for days about their injuries, but they're steady. They're 20-16, I believe. They're first in the division. They've won 2 in a row, and they're 7-3 in their last 10. I don't have the current score up right now, although I know they're playing. They had an 8:00 game, so don't know what's going on with that. But again, they've been playing well despite their injuries. I'd say, of course, the standout is their big signing, Mr. Lindor. Despite batting only 195, he still gets on base, leads the team with 20 walks. And you got Dominic Smith and Pete Alonso. They each have 30 hits apiece. So you have guys that are stepping up and doing well. But then you look at guys like Michael Conforto and Jeff McNeil, both great contributors, but they're now on the IL. And you look at their pitching trio, 2 out of their 3 guys out of Stroman, Walker, and DeGrom, 2 out of those 3 guys are on the IL. So it's hard to win games when you don't have your top guys playing. The Mets have hung in there. But again, with more guys going on this injured list, it's how long can they hang in there? I don't know. But I think that they're able to still work in those guys. Like you said, next man up mentality. They have a great bullpen. They can move guys in and out. So I think the Mets, they might fall to second or third over the next month or two, but they're still going to be within 2 or 3 games of first place. They know they have those stars. They have the mentality of a great team.
Yeah, the way I look at it is I give them credit for staying afloat right now. They're 20-16 first in the NL East, but things change so quickly. They are losing 3-2 to the Braves in the top of the 7th. We'll update that throughout this segment, see what happens there. But this is a great time for the guy that they paid $340 million to wake up. That's kind of how I see it. Lindor, you talked about the walks. I don't think they care one bit about those walks because he's hitting 191. He only has 3 home runs. You traded your top prospects and then signed them for the next decade to be your franchise leader, to be your guy. And so far, he hasn't been that. And every Mets fan will tell you they've been disappointed. Obviously, you're a month and a half into a 10-year deal, so you're not going to make assumptions that way. But this is a time you need him to carry your lineup. You need him to pick up the slack because they're losing guys. Conforto's been an all-star. McNeil's been an all-star. J.D. Davis had an unreal year, last year. So you need these guys to kind of weather the storm because injuries happen in baseball. The 2019 Yankees were deemed the next man up Yankees. I saw this story everywhere. Cam Maybin was my 3-hitter at one point. So, this is something where I've seen before, and you just have to weather the storm. The guys that are in there need to produce, and that is what it's going to take for the Mets. We'll see what ends up happening. I think what they've done so far to go 11-5 is really impressive in this month. I give them a ton of credit. I do think there's a new aura around this team. I really do that we haven't seen in the past. They've won some games recently where any Mets fan will tell you any other year they lose that game. So I want to give credit to them there, but let's shift over to the other side of town here with the Yankees because they have their own injury concerns. Stanton is currently on the IL. It's looking like he'll be back in Tuesday's game, but with Stanton, the injuries, You never do know, so you have to knock on wood and pray there. But Aaron Hicks is the big one. He has a wrist injury. He's debating right now if he should have surgery. That would end his season, or if he should wait it out, which is a very big decision. He did not have a good start to the year. It's year 3 of a 7-year, $70 million deal. And he was hitting 194, and his defense was lackluster. So, Bridge, I want to know what you think of this injury. Is it big? Do they need to go and get someone? How are they going to weather the storm here? What should they do about this Hicks injury?
Let me first start by talking about the Yankees as a whole, because if you're a Yankees fan, I don't care if you're a game and a half out of first place, because this team, it's so disappointing. Let's take a look at the back half of their order. Gardner batting 190, Odor 182, Sanchez 189, Andujar 172, Ford 128, Frazier 151, Higashioka 185. Like, all these guys are batting below 200, and we'll get into this sort of later when we talk about the state of the game and how pitching is at an all-time high and hitting is at an all-time low. But that is no excuse for more than half of your lineup hitting below 200. And when you factor in all of their problems, including the Hicks injury, which, as you stated, he is pondering getting this surgery, which would end his season. Now let's talk about Gleyber Torres and I believe 7 other vaccinated players testing positive for COVID, and they're all still in isolation. Now you have their key setup man, Zach Britton, supposed to be that guy to sort of set the plate for Mr. the Chef himself, Aroldis Chapman, to come in and close things out. He's now experiencing a setback, recovering from elbow surgery. So it's like, what are we doing here? And now you go to the outfield. Hicks, he's on the DL or IL, whatever they call it now, and he could be out for the season. You have Judge and Stanton, who are both sort of playing more DH now. You have Clint Frazier, who looks flat out terrible. So I think what they're going to do, and I like the phrase that you use, weathering the storm. Guy that's been with the Yanks since I was like yay tall when Brett Gardner joined the team. He's their guy. He's been there forever. You're going to see a lot of Brett Gardner, whether it's in left or center field, throughout the remainder of the season. And they might even have to pick up some guy at the trade deadline in order to compensate for just the lack of talent that they have, whether it's hitting or defensively in the outfield. Even Judge talked about he's covering less space when he's running after these fly balls than he used to. He said he's trying to play it safe, but by playing it safe, he's not getting these outs, which means the runners are safe, right? I mean, it doesn't work out. It's frustrating. But the one good thing, if you're a Yankees fan, has to be their pitching. Cole has been the ace. I mean, he's 5-2, 2.03 ERA. You have Herman looking great. I mean, he's been a pleasant surprise this season. Even Montgomery and Kluber have been solid, decent, right? I mean, Tyone is sort of their, I guess you could say, weak link at this moment, but still a solid pitching rotation is what's really keeping them afloat, which is so surprising because before the season, you'd say, well, the Yankees, they're going to out-hit everyone. They're going to out-homer everyone, but they're out-pitching everyone. It's like, what? Like, who could have seen this coming, right? But, they ended up out-pitching everyone, which, sure, it works, but that is not what's going to win you a championship. The Yankees, this team was built to hit home runs, and Judge is hitting a few, but they're not hitting as much as they should. So, again, I apologize for the rant, but Yankees aren't in great shape right now. They need to make some changes personnel-wise in order to really make a deep run this October. What do you think?
Yeah, a few things you said there I want to touch on. Zach Britton, I think that's a huge one. He had a setback the other day. When it's an arm, it's never a good thing. You're always going to worry. We'll see what the MRI says. That is very disappointing. You mentioned all those guys average under 200. Going into yesterday's game, I don't know how it changed because they actually had a really nice game yesterday. They were hitting 188. They're 6-9 hitters, which is just, you can't have that, because the thing that had been so fun to watch about this lineup the last 4 or 5 years was the balance, was how 1-9 could give you hell. They give you an at-bat. They take you deep. There's no soft spots in the order. There's no place the pitcher can coast. And right now they don't have that. You talked about Clint Frazier. He's been a massive disappointment. Aaron Hicks was a massive disappointment. You need to fix that. You need to add balance to the lineup. Yesterday was a really good sign because the way they scored wasn't the long ball. It was double, single, ball off the wall, walk, single. Like it was situational hitting. It was the guys at the bottom of the order coming through. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come. The other thing is with Hicks' injury, and he's a switch hitter, one of the only guys in the lineup who is lefty. That's been a big issue. Hicks obviously part of it. Brett Gardner's another lefty. Ford, going into this game, I think they had like the worst OPS in baseball from lefties amongst their lineup. So that's where you need to improve. You talked about the change in personnel. You got to go out and get a lefty bat. You got to get an outfielder, especially with his hip injury. You can shift guys around. A guy like David Peralta is a perfect fit. He's on the Diamondbacks this year. He looks like he's going to be available. He's a great fit for this team because of the balance he gives. He's a contact singles guy. He'll steal you a base. He's getting up there in age, but if you just get him for now, get him for the stretch run, his contract's very manageable. It's like $7 million a year. He's a perfect fit into this lineup. You can balance it out that ways because you do need a lefty in this lineup. You need to add to that because it is a concern. And so he's a guy I think you go and get. I do think it's not him. You have to be aggressive. Our great producer, Alex, he asked me yesterday, what do you think about the Yankees right now? And I just flat out said, Cashman's got to do something. I'm not someone who's always, I know it's middle of May and it's kind of weird to say you got to make a move right now. But the way this lineup's hitting, I want it to be aggressive because the Yankees do have a great shot coming up. And I want to see them capitalize because the last few years you haven't been paying the Judges, you've been paying the Torreses. And that's going to add up. And that clock is ticking to where you have to pay those guys and cut impact players somewhere else. So I do think you got to be aggressive here. They're 4 games above 500. They're looking fine. Right now, actually, this will tie into something we're about to talk about. You talked about the pitching earlier, how it's been a pleasant surprise. Corey Kluber has a no-hitter through 5 innings. They're a 0-0 game right now. I know I'll knock on wood. People will probably kill me once he gives up a single next inning. But I felt like it was my duty to report that. So, we'll see what happens there. But that's kind of where I'm thinking with the Yankees right now. Let's shift to a guy who many thought should have been a Yankee. I thought should have been a Yankee. He was a guy that they touted for years. They manipulated their international bonus money to offer him the most, and that's Shohei Ohtani. He's kind of been the story of baseball this year, and for as much as I don't like him for spurning the Yankees, I have to tip my cap where it's due because what he's doing right now, we haven't seen since Babe Ruth, and he's Babe Ruth with wheels. He's 17th in steals. We all know what Babe Ruth looked like. He wasn't stealing bases. The talent that Shohei Ohtani has and what he is doing, I truly believe it's like the greatest achievement in sports right now. Being able to do it from both sides of the plate, I don't know, Bridge. What do you think on that?
I mean, when you think of a two-way player, you usually think of basketball, not baseball, right? I mean, this guy, dude's a pitcher and a hitter, not in the National League. I mean, he's doing something different. He's primarily playing DH for him now, but he can trot out to the mound, pitch a few innings. I think, what you said wouldn't be an exaggeration to say it might be the most impressive feat in sports at this moment. I mean, he leads the team in RBI. He leads Major League Baseball in home runs. This guy is seriously doing it all. And it's disappointing because the Angels, they're still 4th in their division, despite, Ohtani's performance. And of course, Mr. Mike Trout, Mr. Baseball, Mr. MLB, the face of the league. I mean, you have these two guys and you're still 4th in the division. Of course, early on in the season, lots of time to go. I mean, you play 162 games, nothing set in stone by May. Even August, things are still up in the air. But if you're an Angels fan, if you're a baseball fan at all, you love to see this because, like you said, it's been since Babe Ruth, since you've had a pitcher who is dominant, who is also just as good, if not better, from the plate, from both sides of the plate. And this guy is seriously a 2-way, a 3-way, a 4-way. He can do it all. I mean, he's so much fun to watch. I love it.
Yeah, to lead the MLB in homers and then have the same ERA as Max Scherzer, it's unbelievable. Going into today, they had a 2.10 ERA. He actually is pitching right now. He's given up 1 run through 4 innings. So solid stuff so far. And you talked about how are the Angels in 4th place with his season, with having the best player in baseball in Mike Trout. It's because outside of Ohtani, they have no pitching. They've done an awful job developing pitchers. And so then where they turn to is the free agent market. They bring in these journeymen. They bring in these guys on 1-year flyers, and they haven't been able to produce. Outside of Shohei, the lowest ERA a starter has right now is 4.7, and then it's up in the 5s. So that is another issue for the Angels. They do really need to address that because it's one thing wasting maybe the greatest player of all time, but it's another to be wasting the greatest, historical achievement in sports right now. The Angels got to get better in that aspect. We need them on the biggest stage because it's no secret that baseball is dying, and we're going to get into some of the reasons why right now, actually. And having guys like this is what's so good for the game. You need to grow this guy and to become a global superstar. In Japan, we know how big he is. He needs to be that big in the United States and across the world. But let's get into right now. I just talked about why the game is dying. It's because of guys like Tony La Russa. Tony La Russa, 76-year-old manager. He's back after 10 years. And, I'll get into why I don't like any of that or him in a minute. But so he's in the news, and the kind of baseball's in the news for the unwritten rules, right? We know last year, Fernando Tatis hit a grand slam on a 3-0. It sparked a lot of controversy and all that stuff. We had a similar event on Monday night where Yermin Mercedes, the rookie sensation for the White Sox, up 15-4 in the ninth inning on a 3-0 count from a position player, he hits a home run. It's 47 miles an hour. He goes deep here. There's been a ton of talk about it. But before I get into that, Bridge, what are your overall thoughts on this kind of unwritten rule? Do you think that, Tony La Russa gave the take sign, Mercedes ignored it? Do you think that it was justified by Mercedes? Do you think he should have took it? Do you think La Russa's in the wrong? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, baseball is America's pastime, right? I mean, the game's been around for so long. We're talking over 100 years here. So there are a lot of rules, unwritten rules, that have sort of been the standard for a long time. I mean, I'll just throw a couple out there. Don't bunt to break up a no-hitter. Like, that's a pretty obvious one, right? Or don't steal third base when there's 2 outs. Little things like that. And you touched on, you shouldn't swing on a 3-0 pitch, especially when your team is up late in a game. And of course, you have the position player. I forget how to pronounce his name. I think it's Astudillo, pitching for the Minnesota Twins. And I think he's a utility guy. Might be an outfielder. I'm not sure. He threw like a 47-mile-an-hour pitch. Like, he is just out there trying to. There's no clock, but you're really running out the clock. The baseball version of garbage time, right? And he throws 47 miles an hour, and Mercedes turns around and hits a 429-foot home run. Like, he bashes this ball, and he saw the sign to take it. I think out of respect for both your manager and the sport as a whole, I mean, that's just. You should just take that pitch, right? I don't think hitting a home run is necessarily, what you want to do there. I mean, it's stat padding. It adds to, and there is, I read up on this, there was some sort of rivalry between the pitcher and batter. So as, you see his motivation, and of course, Mercedes, I think he's a rookie, so he's new to this. He's excited to play, and you have to respect his love of the game. And I'm not mad at him for any means, but I think that you shouldn't go against what your manager says. I think that I can see by your reaction that you have a different stance on this. So I want to hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. I could not disagree with you more. Honestly, I really couldn't. The only one thing I'll say that I support with La Russa giving the take, Mercedes probably, like, if he gives the take, whatever, but why are you giving a take? Why are you so invested in this game? Few things here. La Russa, not only does he give the take, but he bashes Mercedes. He talked about he made a mistake, so there'll be consequences that he has to endure here within our family. It won't happen again. He's got to respect the unwritten rules. For La Russa to be this much of a hypocrite and say, ripping him for not knowing the unwritten rules when he doesn't know the written rules is insane. La Russa is a guy who didn't know about the extra inning rule. And speaking of unwritten rules, how about the written law? Like, this is a guy who has multiple DUIs. His character is questioned. He is not somebody who should be ripping Yermin for an unwritten rule when he doesn't know the written rules and laws of, the police and what crime is. So that aspect, I could disagree with him so much. And if you don't want him hitting a home run, then don't throw a pitch you can hit a home run on. You have a position player on the mound, and Lance Lynn said, why do we have rules when there's a position player on the mound? He's not, this guy out there isn't a pitcher. He's a position player. He's throwing 47 right down the middle. You have every right to swing, especially at the state of baseball where you're always fighting for your next contract. Mercedes is a 28-year-old rookie. He's grinded through the minor leagues. He's going to go into arbitration in a few years where baseball's a stats game. Every number matters. Every single, every hit, every home run is crucial into getting a next contract. And when the White Sox are ripping him, saying he's not worth what he's arguing he's worth, he can point to his stats. He can point to his home runs, and this adds to that. So from that aspect, I have no problem. What is the point of playing the game of baseball if you're not supposed to try at all points? You're not supposed to try at all times. I don't get that aspect. You're going to swing the bat when you're at the plate because that's what hitters are supposed to do. Who cares if the situation in the game, you're always supposed to go up there and hit. Are you supposed to get out? Or are you supposed to intentionally strike out? Like, I don't understand that aspect. If you throw a pitch and you don't want it to hit a home run, then just don't let him. Like, if you're going to give him a hittable pitch, he's going to hit it. That's my aspect on that. I could not disagree with you more, Bridge.
Oh, I like how passionate you are about this.
Yeah, I'm
And
very passionate.
maybe perhaps I'm not as educated as you are on the topic, but I also I do like where you're coming from, because you talked about baseball not being, maybe not being what it once was, but it's sort of, losing fans. It's not as exciting. It's dying out in a way. And maybe this is one of the reasons that you have old guys like La Russa trying to uphold these old standards, and that you have a guy like Mercedes trying to hit a home run in the ninth inning, up 10 points, 10 runs. That's kind of exciting. Maybe that'll get more people to watch baseball. I don't know if you agree on that, but I think this also segues into our final sort of baseball segment on the amount of no hitters this season, and is pitching at an all-time high, is hitting at an all-time low. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a ton of reasons why things aren't the way they were. And one thing, it's because of people like La Russa, who was so outdated, should be nowhere near a manager job, only has it because he's buddies with the owner, and the owner saw him win 15 years ago. And so now, since they're buddies, he's going to just give him the job. When you don't connect with your players like La Russa, you saw Lance Lynn spoke out against him. Tim Anderson commented on Instagram, and I don't even think Tony La Russa knows what Instagram is, in support of Mercedes. Guys like Lewis are the reason the game is dying. And another reason is the offense is at an all-time low, as you said. Right now, the league average is under 240. And when you're talking about that, the story of the season has been no hitters. And it's getting to the point where it really is too much. I tweeted, I think after the third no hitter, that it was May 4th, I think. And I was like, this can't be history anymore. We're May 4th. It's happened 3 times. No hitters are not what they once were. And I hate that we're in that state, because no hitter watches are always, you turn on SportsCenter, you turn on MLB Network to see the final 3 outs. And it's just not that anymore. We have 5 no hitters, and we're a quarter into the year. So we're on pace for 20 no hitters, which is absolutely absurd. Is it from deadening the ball? Is it from moving with the seams? I don't know, but something has to be done, because it's taking a special part out of the game in that way. Don't see the shine that it once was, especially when it's every day, every week, there's no hitter watches. Even if there's not no hitters, we got a guy with a no hitter in the 6th inning right now, as I just talked about. So it's not what it once was, and it's something that I think needs to be changed. I don't know how, with the balls moving the mound. But yeah, pitchers are just too dominant this year, and it's something the league has to address.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think about this. Think about the triple-double in basketball, what it was 10 years ago versus what it was now. 10 years ago, if some guy gets to get triple-double, of course, you compare no-hitters and triple-doubles. They're very different. No-hitters are far more rare. But you have seen no-hitters become more common, and you've seen triple-doubles become also more common. And as a result, a guy like Russell Westbrook averaging a triple-double is no longer as big a deal as it is. And my fear is that the game of baseball is moving towards no-hitters not being as big a deal as you once said. Now, here are a couple of facts for you. So the record for no-hitters in a season was back in 1884 with 8, right? And if we look at just the modern era, then it's 7. So we already have 5, and we're on pace for, I think you said 20. And the league batting average is 236, which is the lowest of all time. I mean, 1968, it was 237. And, after 68, the MLB, they lowered the mound, they tightened the strike zone because pitchers have become too dominant. And today, the strikeout rate is the highest it's ever been. So we're kind of reaching a similar problem that they had back in 68, where pitchers are too dominant, hitters are flat out terrible. And there's really just 3 approaches at the plate now: strikeout, walk, or home run. Where's the single? Where's the double? Where's the just make contact, put it in the outfield? It's, batters, they're almost just willing to sell out contact in order to just increase their power, because everyone wants to hit a home run now. And I don't know, it's really just so many more strikeouts. And yeah, it's cool. You see some home runs every once in a while, but I don't know, man. The game of baseball has changed so much, and you're not seeing just the fundamentals of the game. They're dying out. And I'm not sure what changes need to be made, but I think after this season, sorry about the noise outside. I think after this season, some changes need to be made, whether it's moving the mound, something, because pitchers are too good now. There needs to be what they did in 68. It worked. This is going to be the 2022 change, 2021, whatever it's called. I think that something needs to happen. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, I don't know what the answer is, because the answer to all the home runs, which were at an all-time high from 18 to 20, was let's deaden the ball. It's what they did this year. They've talked about the modifications. They won't go out and say they deadened the ball, but it's very clear something happened. It's taking me time to adjust. I'm watching this game at home. I look at a ball, I look up, I get all excited, and it's just a fly out to the warning track. And I think it's because my brain these last few years has been programmed to think that hit in that location is a home run because of the balls. So I don't know what it is, if it's moving the mound, if it's messing with the seams, but it's very clear that this is an issue with baseball. They're probably trying to de-incentivize the three outcome at bat with a walk, a strikeout, and a homer. But deadening the balls has not been the answer. It's killed a fascinating part of the game, like no-hitters, because even people who are just casual baseball fans aren't really diehards. They know what no-hitters and perfect games are. It's something that everyone understands the concept of. And now, the specialness about it is out the window. So we'll see what happens there. We're going to take one last break, Bridge. We're going to come back to the NBA, talk some Coach of the Year stuff, some awards, and some Julius Randle All-NBA if you should make it. Make sure to stick around for our last segment of the show. It's coming up next on WFUV Sports. Welcome back to One-on-One Nightly, our final segment of the night. Thank you guys so much for, keeping up with us all throughout the night. We're going to send you guys on your way very soon. But first, we're going to talk a little more NBA, particularly with some awards. A few days ago, Monty Williams was awarded the Associates Coach of the Year award. Not the official kind of Coach of the Year award that's recognized by the NBA, but it's the one that the coaches around the league vote on. So it's certainly noteworthy. And obviously, us being Knicks fans, we feel very passionately about our guy, Tibbs. But Monty certainly has a great resume to win it. Bridge, I want to get your thoughts on Monty winning this award. And overall, with the real Coaches of the Year award coming up, do you think it'll be Monty? Do you think it'll be Tibbs, and why?
Well, it's a matter of who do I think it will be and who it will actually probably be. Look, we're both Knicks fans, as you mentioned. I'm the biggest Tibbs supporter there is. He's done so much for the franchise this year. When you look at where they were last year and where they were this year, I mean, they had 9 months off between last March and the beginning of this season. So they had a lot of time for, personnel changes and for Tibbs to really bring that culture in. And it's obviously changed. When you look at predictions versus reality, I think you can look at that with both the Suns and the Knicks, both of them surpassing. But I think the key difference is the Knicks, yeah, they got a new coach, but nobody actually thought they would do that well. When you look at the Suns, they picked up Chris Paul. So people, and after they came off of 8-0 in the bubble, they were a pretty streaky team. Everyone they didn't think they'd be maybe the 2 seed, but they expected them to be a good playoff team the following year. So I don't know. I think Tibbs should be the coach of the year because of how much the Knicks improved from last season to this season and how they've been able to overcome all odds. Whereas, yes, I think Monty Williams is a great runner-up. I think that he deserves a lot of praise for what he's done with the Suns. But look, I'm biased. I'm going to say it. I think Tibbs is the guy. What about you?
Yeah, well, the aspect that you said that the Suns had expectations, I can't run with that only because I had them missing the playoffs, even with the addition of Chris Paul.
Oh, wow.
I know that he did it in OKC, and for some reason, it was easily my worst take going into this year. I just thought it was a move that wouldn't accelerate them. I thought the bubble was all hype and just, a weird 8-game stretch. But clearly I was wrong. The Suns team under Monty Williams has figured it out. He's done a great job. And they've really been just as dysfunctional as the Knicks, honestly. They have a super long playoff drought as well. So you have to give him credit there. But the thing with Tibbs, and I'm going to go with Tibbs, and I'm going to honestly say this and try to keep my bias out of that, is because when you look at, obviously they shattered the expectations, but it's what he did with what he had, right? Monty Williams had a ton of talent. You had a guy like CP3 who's a Hall of Famer. You have Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton, who are really solid 1-2. You have nice 3-and-D, Mikal Bridges. Ricky Rubio has been a solid point guard in the league. He clearly had talent, and you give him credit for putting that talent together and doing it. But with what Tom Thibodeau had was one Julius Randle, who was going into the year. People would argue one of the worst contracts in the NBA, right? The Knicks panicked. They gave him this money. He had a pretty up and down first year in the Knicks. He was not well liked at all. And then he had guys that were unproven and hadn't done anything in this league. He had Elfrid Payton starting 63 games, which I don't know if that helps or hurts, but it's certainly impressive that he was able to win 41 games with Elfrid Payton starting. Obviously, he's struggled a ton. And I think that you have to look at that. With what he has and what he's done, it is more impressive than Monty Williams. He took over a defense that was bottom 25 in almost every category last year. And really without any top stout defenders coming in, besides Noel, they go to top 4 in every category. They showed a graphic the other day, and it was like 28th, 1st, 25th, 4th, 28th, 1st, 27th, 1st of all the defensive metrics and how the Knicks have gotten so much better. And that is all credit to Tom Thibodeau. And I think when you look at the success of the Suns, you can argue that a lot of that is because of CP3 coming in there, changing the culture up. But with Tom Thibodeau, it's what he was able to unlock in Julius Randle. It's what he was able to do with RJ Barrett, turning him into a legit two-way wing who can give you 18 efficiently. It's with the shooting. It's with the team. The culture that the Knicks have, as we talked about the Big 15 earlier, they buy in to Tom Thibodeau. They believe in him. He's the guy to lead their team. So from that aspect, I think it's Thibodeau. I really hope so. I think if the season actually was another 2 weeks, the way that the narrative was building towards the Knicks and the hype that they were getting, I think that momentum would have carried into this award in a landslide. But I think because of the way the season ended, obviously, towards the end of the year, all the hype was Thibodeau. Monty Williams was definitely the favorite early. I think that could carry out. I think it'll be a close race, but I absolutely do believe, try to be unbiased here, that it should be Tom Thibodeau to win this award.
Yeah, no. And yeah, even if the season went a couple more weeks, and I'm almost glad it didn't, because who knows where the Knicks would have ended up seeding wise, right? I think Thibodeau has proved himself on so many levels, and that I think you agree with me that, yeah, it was probably the early season hype or success of Monty Williams that sort of just carried him this season. But I think as we shift gears to one of our final segments here, we're talking about MVP, All NBA, where Julius Randle fares in all of this. I think, who do you think is your MVP this season in the NBA? Is it Jokic? I mean, who is it?
Yeah, well, I don't really think this is the conversation it was a month ago. I think Vegas reflects that. I think Jokic is now minus 4,000 to win the award. So no value, trying to bet him at this point. And I think it should be Jokic. With what he was able to do, he didn't miss a single game. He led his team in almost every statistic. It was points, assists, rebounds, steals, field goal percentage, efficiency. you name it, he led the Denver Nuggets in that stat. I think what he was able to do was just really – he did improve a ton also. I think, the most improved player is probably Julius Randle. I think Jokic is a fascinating case too because his points went up 8 a game. Every other stat increased. So I think he makes noise there too. But I think what he was able to do with once Jamal Murray got hurt is what sealed him the award. The second Jamal Murray went down, I picked Jokic, not because I necessarily thought they would go 16-8, but I thought even just going 12-12 in that stretch would be enough to show that he was able to weather the storm with his number 2 out, but he was able to do much more than that. We've talked about it. 16-8 when your number 2 goes down is extremely impressive. The other guys that you could talk about, an Embiid or LeBron, I just think they missed too many games. And then you have Curry, which I think is really interesting. I would beat the drum on Curry if his team was just a little bit better. It's going to be really tough with an 8 seed. I think the lowest ever was Westbrook as that 6 seed a few years ago, but that was an anomaly. He had the narrative from day one on his side where basically he just needed to go out and show that he could be a number 1 without KD. He did that. Obviously, the triple-double, averaging that. He had a magical season. So I get that. But besides that, I think it was a 3 seed with Jordan. So it typically is a higher seed. I just don't think Curry's team had enough success. But averaging 32 a game, at 33 years old and leading the league in scoring was certainly impressive. He proved a lot of people wrong in that aspect. But it has to be Jokic, right? I don't want to take anything away from him. I think he deserves it. I think he'll win in a landslide. Some of the votes have been leaked so far. I think it was about 40 of them, and all of them had Jokic as their number 1 MVP candidate. So I expect whenever the announcement is, it will be Nikola Jokic, and I don't think there is too much kind of criticism on that.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that. I think just based on everything, Jokic will be the MVP. There's so much that has happened. I think Luka Doncic coming into the season might have had the highest odds to be MVP, but so much has changed, as you say, whether it be injuries or just, players performing not how people expected to. Luka didn't have a bad season. He just didn't have the season Vegas thought he would have. LeBron was having a fantastic season before he got hurt. People were thinking that he had one more MVP in him. There was that narrative there. Then there was Harden on the Nets going off in the absence of KD and Kyrie going on his spiritual journeys. So it was really just Harden doing his thing in Brooklyn. And they were, a lot of people were saying he was the reason why they were winning. But then Harden gets hurt. And then you have it down to Jokic and Curry. And like you said, based on seeding, based on how Jokic is leading his team in almost every statistical metric, and he's played all 82 games, just consistency-wise, it's hard to go with any other person from a logical point of view.
Yeah, another funny thing I think with the MVP is you look at Giannis because his numbers are almost identical to his back-to-back MVP numbers. They're better than his 2018 numbers, slightly worse than 19, and he's not even in the conversation. He's not even in the first paragraph of guys that are being talked about, which I think is so funny. It's like the fatigue, the voter fatigue. It's why LeBron was an MVP 7 straight years and all those years with the Heat, because voters just get tired. The media gets tired of voting you MVP every year. You get the back-to-backs, and then, Giannis is kind of pushed aside. We saw with Harden and Curry as well. And I think it also talks about the state of the game, how we have so many strong candidates, so many guys, 28, 29 a game, right? Just like 6 years ago, Curry won the MVP averaging 23. That's Julius Randle numbers right now, who obviously is awesome, and we'll talk about in a minute. But the way that the game has changed, the stars that we have in this league, there's a lot of hope for the future. But yeah, going back to the MVP, I think it has to be Jokic. You can't make a case. I tried to kind of talk myself into Curry on this show a few weeks ago. And since then, I feel like Jokic kind of shut down any of those rumors. Another guy who I saw some people have as their number 1 is Chris Paul because of the impact he's had and everything like that, which I'm sorry, his numbers just aren't there. They're not even close to what Jokic is averaging. So I think it's Jokic pretty handedly. He should be unanimous. I don't know if he should be unanimous, actually. Let me take that back. He should be the MVP, though. There will be guys who vote for Curry, I'm sure. And I think that's really the end of this debate.
Yeah, no, I don't think he'll be unanimous. I mean, I'd be surprised. I think Curry was the only unanimous. I think, was it 2016, I think? And I think you couldn't make a case for anyone else back then. I mean, 73-9 that season? About as perfect as you can get. But let's talk about Julius Randle. His case for All-NBA. Is he first, second, third? Is he the most improved player? Just all things Julius Randle to sort of close the show today.
Yeah, so let's close the show with this, the All-NBA Julius Randle stuff. This season has been the way that it's gone for Randle is remarkable because going in, obviously he's hated. Then it becomes, hey, this guy's pretty good. Then it goes to, the Knicks Twitter goes on a fierce campaign to get him to the All-Star game, right? Julius Randle's an All-Star. You couldn't escape a Knicks Instagram or Knicks Twitter post without seeing that everywhere in the comments. He gets to the All-Star game, and then it kind of shifts to, well, this guy's an All-NBA guy. He's a third-team All-NBA guy. Then it goes to the most improved player, and now it looks like he's a runaway for that. And now it's gotten to the point where it's, you had to put Julius Randle on the second team. And I just think it's remarkable to see how it's shifted. You said first team, no disrespect to him because he's been everything I could have ever asked for. But he doesn't have the numbers for first team. There's too many deserving guys there. But I do really think you can make the case for second team. And when looking at the second team, there's a few things to break down because obviously he's a forward. And there are three other forwards that are competing for two spots for the second team. It's Kawhi, LeBron, and Jimmy Butler, right? All those guys are right up there. Their numbers are all pretty similar, interchangeable. Julius has more points than Jimmy, same as LeBron, less than Kawhi, more rebounds, same assists, whatever. They're all pretty similar. So I think there's one outlier where Julius Randle should get that nod over all three, if I'm being honest, and it's with the games played, right? The three of them have missed the average of 22 games, being LeBron, Kawhi, Jimmy Butler. Julius Randle has missed one all year, and he led the entire league in minutes played. So when you look at it from that aspect, I feel like that has to be kind of a tiebreaker here. You have to give it to the guy who played the most amount of minutes in the league, who had pretty much the same stats. If anything, that makes it more impressive. He was able to keep it up, and he was able to get better throughout the season because he wasn't 24, 11, and 6 all throughout the year. That kind of improved as we got later in the year. He was dropping 30 almost every game towards the end of it. And the one thing I will say, I saw an article the other day, and it did really irk me. It was somebody, who has a vote. They were choosing their all-NBA teams, and they didn't put Julius on the second team. They put him on the third, and they put LeBron above him. And the reasoning was that I know every year LeBron in and out is going to do it. I don't think Julius Randle can do it next year. I know LeBron will do it next year. So that's why I'm going LeBron. I think that's ridiculous that these people are voting on the award because it's all NBA for the 2020-2021 season. It's not throughout their career or anything like that. It's not a legacy award. That's the only thing that would hurt Randle here in the voting is the legacy award because obviously Kawhi and LeBron have multiple finals. Jimmy Butler's been to the finals. They're all bigger names, all bigger stars in that aspect, all bigger followings. But Julius Randle this season deserves it. He really does deserve second team. I strongly believe that, and it would be really a shame if he gets stripped from him just for simply not being the household name that the other guys are.
Yeah, that's a great point. That All-NBA is a regular season award, and voters, no matter how unbiased you think they may be, they will look at it as a legacy award. They look at LeBron James, and they don't see a guy who's missed half this season and who's been in and out of the lineup. They see a guy who's won 4 championships and has been a perennial player throughout his career. They look at LeBron from a career and they say, oh, he's been like this every year. Therefore, let's put him second team, first team, whatever the case may be, right? And that's a huge problem because Randle, like you said, he might not have another season like this. As much as it hurts me to say, I love Randle, but this isn't, this could be an anomaly here, right? So let's give him, his props, his credit where it's due. He's deserving of that second team spot. He really is. And he has the momentum. I mean, there's nothing I love more than the Knicks social media fan base. I mean, they are, they're awesome. They show so much love. They'll hate you, but they'll also love you more than any other fan base. They'll support you. They'll lift you up. And as you said, the campaign to get Julius Randle into the All-Star game, and now it's the most improved player, and now in the All-NBA. I've even heard, people trying to get him into the MVP conversation, which, is a bit outlandish, but you just love to see it from the fans, the passion there. So I think overall, Julius Randle, he's exceeded all expectations. He shook the narrative that he was the Beyblade. He was spinning in the paint last year. That's what everyone called him. And he's been able to shake that off. He's been able to become a dead-eye mid-range shooter, dropping nearly 25 a game. He's everything you look for in a forward and a leader and the heart and soul of the New York Knicks franchise. And he hopes to lead them over the Hawks in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, like I say this with all seriousness. I think what he's done this year is like the most remarkable thing that I've seen as a Knicks fan, to jump across the board in every statistical category and improve the way he has, not even just as a player, but as a person, right? His work ethic got, a million times better. I think it was after the season, he just grinded. The team got together. They worked out together. He got himself into shape. You talked about the Beyblade stuff. He was just spinning out of double teams last year. turning the ball over left and right. He heard a lot of criticism from the Knicks. And there's an article that came out a few weeks ago, outstanding. I apologize, I don't remember where. And it was about a sit down he had with, I think, Worldwide Wes and Leon Rose months before they were hired by the Knicks, about how, this was a failure. Obviously, he had ties with them in the Kentucky stuff. He said how much of a, disappointment it's been with the Knicks. He made a list of all the things he hates about the Knicks and what he wants to change. He felt terrible he wasn't able to put it on for the fans. And this year he's been able to do so much. He really has embraced the city as a whole. And his attitude throughout the whole thing has been really you have to give him props. And, the one last thing I'll close it on, hoping and thinking he'll get the second, is the momentum. I think that's so important when people are voting on this award, because just the way we are, designed as humans, we remember what just happened. And what everyone just remembers is the Knicks closing out the season on a great stretch and Julius Randle being the number one guy for that. But that's all we have for today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you to Alex Woltz, our great producer. Thank you, Bridge. I'm Ryan Gregware. Thank you to our sports director, Bobby Ciaffardini. One on One Nightly is a production of WFUV Sports.